Good morning, friends. Welcome to our next learning session. And as we are going ahead, this is becoming a little more difficult for you as well as for me. Now, today I am going to tell you some of the adverse effects of smoking on the nervous system, that is the brain and other parts. Now, before we understand the effects, first understand the brain and its some parts. Let us see this diagram. Now, see this diagram. I am bringing close to the screen so that you can see in a large portion. See what do you see? Look here. This is the portion. It is marked CC. What does it mean? It means cerebral cortex. This entire region is the cerebral hemisphere. This is from here this way. This is the cerebral hemisphere. And you all know there are two cerebral hemispheres. Hemi means half. Sphere means half of the circle. That is the hemisphere. So half is on the left side, half is on the right side. So we say left side of the brain, right side of the brain. But what we are talking of is the covering the outer layer of the hemisphere. That is called cerebral cortex. It has got gray matter. Medically, it is spoken as gray matter, a very important part of the brain for our memory, thinking and learning. Now, there are certain important things in this also, but before I go, see this portion which is I marked like this and here. This entire portion is given a name called brain stem. Look here, close, make it close to the screen. This is called brain stem. And this portion is called cerebellum. This protuberant portion is called pons, and this lower portion is called medulla. These are very important regions because in these regions there are some very important centers which control our body. For example, our respiration is controlled from here, our heartbeat is controlled from here, blood pressure is controlled from here, and our eye movements and other things are controlled from this region. And this small part is the midbrain. So in line with midbrain, the pons and the medulla oblongata, this entire structure is together called brain stem. So this is the hemisphere, this is the brain stem, and this portion is a third part of the brain called cerebellum. Mind it, it is cerebrum. Here it is cerebral cortex, cerebrum. This is entire is cerebrum, but this is cerebellum, double L-U-M, cerebellum. This is different than this. This controls coordination of the various movements of the body. So very important organ. If this falters, then your movements are not controlled and you start getting bizarre movements. So I have told you some of the important parts of the brain. There are many others I am not talking about, but you also understand that this is the front part of the brain and this is the back part of the brain. Now, just to understand a little more, look at this diagram. Look at it. These are some raised areas separated by these lines. These are called sulci. Sulcus is one. Sulcus is a depression. Sulcus is a depression in the brain, and sulci is plural of the. So these are many such depressed areas which cut the elevated parts from the other elevated parts, and these are called sulci. And these raised areas, these are the functioning units of the brain. There are certain other structures which I don't think I can remember, but those who are interested, this is called corpus callosum. Okay? So the fibers, they start from the very important thing is that this cortex is covered by a thin layer called gray matter. So this is the very important part, and as we age, this becomes thin. Look at another diagram to understand. Look at this diagram, and this is that cerebral hemisphere. This is the front portion. This is near our forehead. This portion is near our forehead. This portion is the back of the head. And this, you see, this is a different area of the brain from the rest of the cortex. This is called, because it is on the front, this is being called frontal lobe. And this is on the back, it is called occipital lobe. And this lobe is separate from these frontal and occipital lobes. This is called temporal lobe. It has got a very important center, that is the center for hearing. And this is the cerebellum, and this is the brain stem, as I told you before also. And look at one more diagram before I tell you. Look at this diagram. This is the brain stem coming. This is the part of midbrain, and this is that temporal lobe. This is the frontal lobe. This is the occipital lobe. So this is how the brain functions. What happens by smoking? Smoking accelerates the process of aging. You see, whatever was the condition of brain at the age of 70, in smokers, the same thing occurs at the age of about, let us say, roughly about 50 years. So the brain at the age of 50, your brain is equivalent to the brain of a 60 or 70 years old person. That means it has aged. And we know that with aging, the function becomes less. If you quit smoking, does the function recover? Yes, partial reversal is known to occur in these cases, but unfortunately this is a very long process, and therefore earlier you quit, the better it is. Brain aging does not occur suddenly at any given time. It is a slow process. Now, how many years it takes for the brain to recover from smoking? Usually it takes about a year. But what happens? It is an individual matter, varies from person to person. So it can go up to even 15 years. So recovery may take about 1 to 15 years. Therefore, it makes it still important to stop smoking at the earliest. Now, what happens when you smoke a cigarette? The two hormones are liberated. One is dopamine, the other is epinephrine. Both makes you feel pleasure, they make you happy. And as the effect passes off, the person goes into fatigue and depression, and therefore that leads to the craving for the next cigarette. You smoke and get into a vicious circle that is called the addiction to smoking. It becomes difficult for you to leave it because you feel lethargic, you don't feel like working, you are not like doing any work. Therefore, it is important to keep these things in mind. Now, what happens to the fetus? If a lady has conceived, the nicotine exposure in the womb can cause perinatal death. Perinatal death means just after sometime within 1 month of the birth of the child, the death can occur. Nicotine can cause permanent changes in the cell functions of the brain. It can cause permanent changes in the cell functions of the brain, and it can also cause some structural changes in the brain and in the cells of the brain. How long does it take the smoking to affect your brain? Well, and how it looks. You see, your cerebral cortex, that is gray matter, that becomes thin. In smokers, it is thin because smoking destroys the gray matter. And you know it, gray matter is essential for your thinking, your learning, and your memory. And smoking also affects your stem cells. If you stop smoking, the brain recovers from, likely to recover from the smoking within 3 months, after 3 months. So friends, these are the sum of, I said, there are so many studies on smoking describing every functional detail, but that it becomes difficult for all of us to understand. Therefore, I leave the research part out and I talk only about the clinical part, the practical part. The practical part is that smoking does affect the brain. It makes the outer layer of the brain, that is the gray matter, thin. Gray matter is important for thinking, learning, and for keeping our memory updated. The smoking gives us pleasure by producing two hormones, dopamine and epinephrine, and as the effect wears off, the person becomes lethargic, depressed, and fatigued, and therefore that causes the craving for the next cigarette, and that is how one becomes addicted. The smoking causes structural as well as functional changes in the cells of the nervous system, that is the brain and other parts, and recovery can occur if you stop smoking in 3 months, but the total complete recovery may occur anytime within 1 to 15 years. So friends, it is very important not to smoke. It is very important to stop at the earliest if you are already a smoker. And thank you very much for listening to me, and next time we will take another interesting topic. Thank you.